Too early to meow meow.
It's never too early for an espresso maltini.
Meow.
That was a meow check, okay?
Meow check.
So let's do this.
Yeah.
All right. What's up, y'all? It's Monday, and not just any Monday. It is Marvelous Monday. Thank you, Ketel One, another round, another rally, and Portland Cocktail Week for having us again. My name is Fanny Chu, and this is my marvelous co-host, the one and only Amie Ward.
Oh, thank you so much, Vandalorian. Very happy to be here with you and our very special guest for today for this Marvelous Monday. Today we have another kick-ass panel. Very excited about this. We have AJ Johnson, Jesse Weinstein, and Kassira Hill all here to talk to us about what's in a label, how to brand to-go cocktails. So very excited to see what they have for us all, coming from different levels of expertise everywhere around. But friends, take it away. Tell us everything.
Amazing. I think we're going to actually just hop right into the slides. If Leo can hook us up with the first slide and actually skip right to the second, that would be absolutely amazing. My name is Jess Weinstein. I am the Director of Development and Drinks for Maidon and Compass Rose in DC. And I'm incredibly excited to be here again. Just a few weeks ago, I had an amazing conversation with Fanny and Amie about creating within constraints. And I think there were some really, really awesome big ideas that existed in that conversation. And also a really natural progression about, once we have these ideas and we create these game plans, what do we do next? And so today we're going to have an amazing opportunity to speak with Andra AJ Johnson about everything that she does at Serenata, Back to Black, and actually many, many other things. So I'm going to give the floor to AJ really quick just to speak a little bit about her expertise and some of what she's been working on.
Excellent. Thank you, Jess. I appreciate it. Thank you to Ketel One. Good to see you, Fanny, Amie, Kassira. I haven't seen you IRL in forever, so this is great. And Jess, I'll be seeing you this weekend for sure. So my name is Andra AJ Johnson. My pronouns are she and her. I am currently the founder of Back to Black Cocktail Pop-Up. I'm also managing partner and bar director at Serenata in Zumo, and also co-founder of DMV Black Restaurant Week. And so it's been an interesting November already. And we're already only 2 days in. You got Back to Black this weekend and DMV Black Restaurant Week next week as well. Jess, did you want me to hop into the next slide, or do you want me to go ahead and have Kassira introduce herself as well?
I was hoping just to say a quick hello to Kassira and introduce her. So AJ and I are both bar operators to the core and have spent most of our careers in that space. And I think we have pretty good intuition about what to do with a lot of this. However, it's always great to have some help and perspective from someone who has the professional training, knows all of the words, and is very, very good at it. So we're really lucky to actually have Kassira here from Chicago, who has a background in the bar world and also an amazing, amazing design portfolio and aesthetic. So she'll be sharing a lot here with us today. And I just wanted to give the floor to Kassira for a moment to say hi as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, AJ. Thank you all for tuning in. My name is Kassira Hill. I'm a Chicago-based anthropologist, graphic designer, bartender. Pre-pandemic, I was bartending and was an event coordinator, along with being a hospitality industry creator, specifically in the past with things with Ashton Berry and Radical Exchange, and specifically with Resistance Served, a New Orleans-based hospitality and cocktail conference. So pre-pandemic, that's what I was up to. But I've recently made a pivot to do full-time graphic design and branding work. I was doing that work prior, but because of everything going on, decided to make that full pivot over to doing this work specifically. And I'm here to kind of offer a lot of insight with branding and logo design and everything like that, because a lot of the people that I work with are folks that I built connections with in the hospitality and beverage industry prior to making this pivot, right? So I'm here to talk about all the kind of technical moments and maybe insights that you might not be able to easily access without having someone like me in your life, or might have people like me in your life to continue this work. But yeah, that's my perspective, and I'm here to kind of be the graphic designer on call. Thank you.
Amazing. I feel like I learned so much even actually in the planning of this conversation. So I'm really excited to actually hear it from start to finish, and for everyone else to get to engage with some of these ideas as well. So we're going to do some real case in points where we talk about specific examples where some of this material is covered and used. And then Kasira is actually going to walk us through a full brand audit and a graphic design checklist. So I think we can jump right in, and we're going to start with Back to Black, which is AJ's programming. So AJ, take it away.
Heard that. Thank you so much. So Back to Black, what we are and what we sort of turned this program into was born out of my original sort of brick and mortar cocktail concept, which is Serenata. Obviously during COVID and also with all of the racial injustices that were happening around the country, and the fact that a lot of bartenders were out of work, I found that there was a need for self-expression, but there was also a feeling of helplessness with my friends in the industry because it felt like we couldn't do anything. A lot of us were scared to go down to the front lines. A lot of us felt like we weren't helping enough or doing enough. And I decided that I would make some phone calls to some people that I love dearly, but also respect their talents. And everything to sort of help me put together a cocktail pop-up where all the proceeds would go to charities that we either hold near and dear to our heart or had researched on our own to figure out what resources they would need. And a lot of times, though materials help, money is also the best way that you can really go out and help these organizations that are on the front lines every day. The one thing that I've definitely learned through all of this is that everybody has a lane. And when it comes to activism and in that way, like, yes, maybe like me being out there and trying to like, you know, get into the police and not come home every night probably wasn't the best place for me to be because there's still a need for me to be in my business. But there are people out here who are helping people build funds to get people out of jail. They're helping to push through legislation. They're putting out the word about these injustices. And those are the people that really need the help. And so it was a team of about 6 of us, right? 4 bartenders, a chef, a photographer, a videographer, and probably one of the most important pieces of our program, which is our graphic designer, Lorena Prada. And so if you've been to our IG page, Back to Black _pop-up, or our newly launched website, backtoblackpopup.com, all of that work from a visual standpoint was created by our designer, Lorena Prada. She was literally my second call. I believe Capri was my first call because I needed another bartender to really sort of walk this through with, right, and make sure that this is actually something feasible that we could do. But Lorena was my second call, and partially because I knew that if we could get people excited about it from a visual standpoint, then we could actually reach a lot more people than just sort of like putting up a little sign up front and changing the menu at Serenata and say, hey, come on in. There needed to be some reasoning behind what we were doing. And so our initial purpose, and the reason why I started this slide with our initial purpose is because all of our design and graphics from there actually feed into that model. And I think that's very important when we're talking about branding our concepts and what that should actually look like. So just, I mean, really quickly, mobilizing Black bartenders and culinary professionals to show solidarity through continued support of Black activism to end racial injustice in America, right? Heavy, but simple. And so formatting the concept of that traditional cocktail pop-up that we know, where you come up, you get the cocktails, and you leave. You hang out with your friends. There may be some guest bartenders involved, which is always fun because that draw can bring in people that aren't generally in your market. But how do you do that when nobody can be around each other? How do you do that in a global pandemic? And because at Serenata, we did not shut down necessarily, we did all to go stuff. I had a basis of how the packaging could work, how the pickups could be done safely. I think for the first one, we hadn't really thought about interactive things and making it much more of an interactive situation other than, here's your bag, thank you so much, can you sign this board? But I think as obviously the rules got a little bit more lax, we also figured out other ways to keep people safe, and timing pickups really helped with strategizing and streamlining what that was. And it was important, I think, for me to have taken what I learned in my actual bar to really sort of promote how this would work. Because I think activations for a while, they just kind of took a pause, a really, really hard pause. And it's difficult to get people out of the house. And so that was sort of important to just make sure that people feel safe. But also what was great about being able to align that with my current bar is that there was a level of quality that could be assumed from the product that was coming out. And so that's when I knew like calling Lorena was one of the most important calls I could make, because as we're creating these cocktails and I'm getting Frank Mills and Richard Sterling and Capri and myself to create really fun stuff, and Paolo Velez to make brownies for us, is great. As we were creating these really wonderful things, there needed to be simultaneous actual visuals that could go with Serenata programming. It didn't have to be the same thing. Our colors at Serenata are like pink and green and yellow and lots of Monstera leaves and things like that, which doesn't necessarily fit the seriousness of what we're doing. And so I sat down with Lorena and I said, I want to do something with the African diaspora flag. So I definitely wanted to do the green, the black, the red. I love, and this is going to sound really corny, but I like just started following Jaden Smith, and I love the way, I love the way that he does the repeated image all the way across, and then he like really can create his images through the Instagram thing. And like for my Instagram is very hodgepodge, but I do understand the number one, the repetitiveness, which is really, really good because it continues to put that image in people's brains, but also you can create and design these photos that go up on the feed. I have no idea how to do that, right? And then for the logo, me and Lorena had actually just talked about, things that are important and the fact that we call each other storytellers when we're creating, and the redacted lines that you see in the Back to Black, that we use those lines over and over and over, are really to symbolize the redacted history of what has been said and what's been put out there, whether we're learning that in a textbook or in federal documents. Every single time you see that, you know that something's being hidden and the truth's not really being told. And so just like literally by telling her that, she was able to create this amazing graphic that we have there at the top corner, which is our Back to Black logo. And again, something super clean, but I think it really does speak to the mission of the actual programming. And it just all sort of came together. I've never dealt with someone, as Jeff said, like the actual verbiage that goes into creating graphics. I've never dealt with color palettes. I don't understand that. So I would say, like, literally for everybody, make sure that number one, you're finding someone who can create consistent marketing. It doesn't always have to be the same person, right? It's not like Lorena takes the pictures, Naku takes the pictures, but she's very, very deliberate in terms of what's asked for. And once we find those images that we like, we stick with it to create that consumer trust and also knowledge of what our brand is going to be once you consume it. And so that is sort of where we are right now. One pop-up turned into 3 pop-ups. All right. And we actually, again, we'll be doing one with Jess actually at Maidon, November 7th and 8th. But again, I don't think it would have been able to be such a program without people actually understanding what our logo meant, why we have this design going, and the fact that it is so clean and so stark and very different. I think is sort of what sets us apart and makes it extremely important to our concept.
And AJ, I think something cool to point out, and when I first saw what you had dropped into the deck, the fact that you actually, in the title that you put in, you referenced your logo, and that was something that you did naturally. And I thought that was really, really awesome and a great thing to point out, for anyone who's creating new visual content. Anywhere you can weave in what you're doing and create that visual identity and strengthen that, do it. And I love that you did that. It really actually genuinely made me smile very much. So it's like, that's one of those really cool things to see as operators. We're shaped from so many different experiences that some of this stuff, it really does come naturally to us. We literally have no idea how to talk about it to like someone who professionally does that. We don't speak that language, but we're really capable. And when you find collaborators like AJ, the relationship you established with Lorena, you were able to communicate, clearly what you wanted to see and the image and the ideas behind your brand, which coming forward with that is really cool. You know, when you have the opportunity to say, this is what we know we are and this is how we want to be seen, and then you find a designer who can hear you and you can negotiate through that process to create something that's so strong. I mean, your branding is amazing and the idea underneath the branding is amazing, and that's really seen through and through. So that's a really cool, I think, case in point, you know, just to see that all come together. And it came together really quickly. It feels like it happened really fast.
The first one we did in 3.5 weeks. Again, that's why doing the branding and having that simultaneously run with the actual creation of the cocktails, because trying to get all the products for this took just as long as getting what everything should look like together. Right, and making sure that all of the links worked, and you know, making Lorena has all the logos for the sponsors and things like that. All of those things take just as much time, but I think in that way, the organization of everything else also made people take us that much more seriously, and it was something that my home brand at Serenata was happy to be a part of and stand next to. And when we are creating these concepts out of home and base concepts, I think it is really sort of important to sort of figure out what lane you need in that, right? Like, what are you trying to create that you can't just create out of your base concept? And what are your intentions behind it? Because sometimes, you know, I think we try to do too much and want to make it super, super separate, when at the same time, it can just be one lane. So definitely take the time to think of that there, because, you know, the branding aspect can be a little bit, you can spend a little bit more time and go through things like making stickers on Canva in order to convey that, instead of creating full-on programming for a year, you know?
Yeah, it's also nice having all the little details shown as part of the branding too, because consumers do pay attention to that stuff, and they're just like, oh wow, they took that extra time to do this for us, to like notice it too. So yeah. Really cool. For sure.
So we are, as I said, as we're heading into this third pop-up with Back to Black, I think where we're sort of heading now is trying to figure out different partnerships and creating things that we're sort of akin to and we can actually align with. The cocktail pop-up is super fun, but it's one weekend. And there's a way, if we would like to continue this, that we want to make sure that people remember the name and see the name as many places as possible. And so the next step for us has been collaborating with other brands that align with what we go with. Right, and maybe not in a competitive standpoint, but definitely more in a collaborative standpoint. So we have cocktails at Columbia Room right now. We're working on getting a gelato flavor for one of our cocktails made right now. Like, it's just, you know, we're working with another concept with Jess that we're going to talk about in a little bit, you know, and really just sort of seeing how this brand can go forward. But again, I think without that visual recognition, like when people see this, they know who is behind it. They know what we do. You definitely know what it's about, right? In some way, shape, or form, it's very powerful. It's very stark. And so I'm like really excited right now to sort of see where it goes, but it wouldn't be here without that logo.
So where did you find the inspiration behind the design?
For the logo or for the actual curation of the social media?
For both.
For both. So the logo was definitely after the redacted lines of history. That was the big, again, the storyteller aspect of what we do is very, very important. Everybody that participates is a storyteller, because they are giving everything to the guest, right? When you buy one of these cocktails, you're also getting a story about their time as a Black human being in the world, but also maybe in the restaurant industry or whatever sort of experience that they'd like to give. And all of it, nothing is redacted, right? They're giving you what they want you to see because it's been hidden. So that's where the logo from that came from. And she sent me, I want to say, for as simple this is, Lorena probably sent me 35 samples.
Wow.
Right? I mean, it was like, but I mean,
I'm not surprised by that.
There were circles. There was like one looks sort of like an American flag instead of the diagonal lines, and all of those things just so they make that much of a difference, but she sent me over a lot. And this is the one that we landed on, I think, as a group. It just really sort of just speaks to it, to who we are. And it's clean. I'm very, very big on that. If it's too busy, I think the actual vision kind of gets lost. And unless that's part of the actual culture or concept of what you're playing into, I love a good, clean, great font, big, bold. So I can see that down the street, what that is. In terms of the IG creation, she set all of these things. Like, she sends me probably 6 slides a day, right? And everything is, and so she'll send like a 2-week, like, this is what the feed will look like in the next 2 weeks. And literally all I told her was that I want our pictures 3 in a row. She took care of everything else, like literally everything else. I couldn't have done that. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I'm not very well versed in that. And that's where asking for help, especially now, is a huge deal. If you can't create something that's going to put your product in the best possible position to succeed, then you definitely need to reach out. And I think with people like, and Kasira will tell you, and she'll go through this later as well, there isn't a certain amount of budgeting that you need to really sort of get this done the right way. Lorena is an organizer, and she believes in this project 100%. And we work and do this for nominal, if not for free, because this is what we absolutely believe in. I'm just extremely lucky that one of my best friends in the world is also one of the most talented designers I've ever been around. And so when she created this social media feed, everything has a place. If it's not in the right place, she'll go back and she'll switch it. She has it timed with the IG story. It's hitting different things at different points. And she's worked in a lot of restaurant marketing as well before, so she understands the timing of when they're supposed to go out. If I miss a day, it's like, okay, put it up tomorrow, but put it up at this time so we can make sure that we're hitting the right people. And so I need help with that. I'm a creator, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I have a big idea, but having people like that can sort of consolidate all the things that are going on in your brain and put it into one visual that's extremely understandable and relatable to people is super important.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that logo kind of reminds me of like the parental advisory in like albums. That's what it reminds me of, and it's like very eye-catching. So you're just like, oh, that's what it is.
Yep. And we've been able to sort of translate this logo. This is kind of like the last thing I'll put on this thing, but one of the most important things that I found is that she made this logo in different sizes, because I didn't know that we needed this in different sizes. So when I got the first one and I put the first one up on the IG, and she's like, no. And I'm like, it doesn't fit. She's like, I know, because I sent you the one that says the IG logo, that one.
Let me tell you, literally, the most crucial thing that I have for designing someone's logo is designing someone's logo intuitively. So that means, just like you see, very famous brands, right? They've got a full-size logo with maybe it written out and their icon, their imagery that's attached to the logo, and the typeface and the font, naming the brand or naming the business. And then they've got different formats of that same logo that can reduce down.
Yeah.
So important to what you're saying, AJ, is that you come up with a lovely broad spectrum logo. It's got all your font. It's got all your imagery that you want in there. It's fully colored and all of that. But think about the different formats that your logo is going into, right? Because that's going to come into play about utilizing that branding across the spectrum, right? We want a full logo for something that's printed. We want something that's abbreviated for social media icons and circle icons and so on. We want an even more abbreviated one potentially for, letter of agreement or for email signatures or for what have you. So think about your logo as acting on a scale, right? So what do you want your full logo to be? What do you want it to be when it's in a shortened or an abbreviated sense, in a circle or restricted, certain size or what have you for social media? And then what do you want your most baseline logo to be when you're just dropping it on the corner of a graphic, or you're having a collaboration with someone and you need a logo that's a little bit less busy that they're going to be attaching to like the sponsored moments at the bottom. Think about that intuitively, right? Because that logo that operates on a scale, that intuitive logo is going to help you across the board if you're able to establish that in the beginning.
100%. Because trying to get the merchandise out for this, that was the biggest thing. It was like, all right, don't use the IG logo. Now we have to use the larger scale logo. We had posters made, and because of the distortion with the pixelation, we have like 24 by 36s. It takes her 30 seconds. I have no idea what it's a standard poster size. It's just that's not my bag. So, that was literally one of the pieces that I didn't understand at first, just sort of how to make those things work. And again, she put it together. And I'm lucky, and she's amazing. So, yeah, that's Back to Black in a nutshell.
That's amazing, AJ. And I think, Kasira, I love that you brought up that intuitive logo, because if somebody wrote that down on a paper and they were like, okay, Jess, like SATs or whatever, what does this mean? I would not have said, I would have been like something to do with the moon. And like, it's
into a what?
But it makes so much sense and it's so real. And as someone who like low key is doing graphics and website work for the groups that I work with, and I literally like learn it as I go. Like I'm just Googling things, and we'll get into a little bit later, like when I do ask for help, how much better things do get. But like knowing what you just said, now I have homework. Now I need to go and I need to actually make all of those things for our businesses, because that makes so much sense. That's so helpful.
Right. And as we get into this next case in point, we're talking about La Bodega Bakery and Back to Black, right? This is a really great opportunity to utilize one of those intuitive logos, right? Especially if you're doing a collaboration. We'll talk about all the graphic design checklists and what it means to make a logo in a few, but this is a great opportunity to think critically about utilizing our branding and what that branding looks like in a collaborative space, right? If there's two logos back to back, is your logo or is your branding made in a way where that kind of collaboration can be cohesively put together, right? Whether it be with La Bodega and Back to Black, or this other brand with this brick and mortar, you know what I mean? Think about what that branding might look like when you do collaborations. But I'll leave room just for you to continue on with La Bodega, because this is a really great point here.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think while we look at Back to Black and we look at, AJ using a brick and mortar as kind of a foundational place to kind of create what was the beginnings of Back to Black. And then obviously it's become so much more than just a pop-up from this, one existing space. This project, La Bodega Bakery, is basically a concept nested inside of a concept that has other concepts nested in it also, and then some collaboration. So this was definitely a complicated project that happened the way that it has specifically because of the creative constraints of 2020. So in the group that I work for, we have a restaurant that is in an area that does not have a lot of daytime business. And so seeing that we had a space, we had some labor already in the pool during the daytime, and we had, a proven concept that people knew us, people knew our brand, they trusted us. We saw this space where we could do something that was a little bit more daytime oriented. At the same time, we had really started developing a relationship with Chef Paulo Velez, who's an absolutely phenomenal, incredibly talented and great human being based out of Washington, D.C. And we began kind of this journey in the creation of what is now La Bodega Bakery, which is a bakery that is dedicated to basically decolonizing desserts and going on a tour around the world in the same fashion that Compass Rose did, but actually through the bakery. So if you can zoom into the slide a little bit, I know that these photos are a little bit small, but I kind of wanted to see all three of them next to each other. When we really got this concept going, the timeline was really tight, right? So there are worlds where you have a concept, you have your collateral, and you make a plan to release this information and you can follow that plan. There's also worlds where you race against COVID time, because you bring more labor into the pool to create a concept and you don't yet have sales. And you do recognize that as you build these, these ghost concepts or these concepts that are nested inside others, sometimes it takes even a few months. And if you didn't have the opportunity to budget for the development of a program because it was so genuine and so natural in the way that La Bodega Bakery has been, then it does mean that you got to kind of move and groove maybe a little faster than you might want to normally in a lot of different ways. And that does include branding. So, when we really got the nuts and bolts together for La Bodega, we were about a little less than 3 weeks from when we said we need to launch this. If we don't launch it at this date, then we're going to hit the holiday season, and all these other things that we actually felt would be roadblocks. So we really needed to buy ourselves time by releasing the brand sooner than in some ways it was ready, which sounds kind of weird, but apparently it can happen and it can work. So because of that, I, who am not a graphic designer at all, am the one who designed our very first logo. So if you look on the left, on the actual cup, that is a design by me. It's kind of small, I guess, because of the backdrop of that photo, but obviously inspired by, the thank you plastic bags in New York. Chef Paula, she's from New York. We've started this tour in New York. I went to high school in New York. There's a lot of New York ties here. And obviously, like we all think about bodegas, we think about, the coffee in the morning on the way to the subway, or the sandwich at night after we've had a couple drinks, or lots of other spaces. And, for me, I think I really connected with the idea of La Bodega because I see, bars are in between places, right? Those are the places that we go between work and home. Those are the places that we go between, spending social time, maybe having a moment of our own. And then I definitely see a direct correlation with bodegas being these places that are in between moments, where we have community and we have connection. And if we're lucky, we have that, that space in our neighborhood that we go every day and they know what we order and we kind of know something, about their lives and vice versa. And it becomes a really special thing, maybe something that most people actually don't even notice. So I was so excited to actually work on this idea of Chef Paula's and to get to, create the beverage side. It did also put me in a really unique position to have to create our initial logo, which was a challenge, right? Because I work for a bar called Compass Rose. And then also there's a concept called La Bodega. And how do we connect these things, right? The storylines were very much connected. And there was a lot of parallels between the ideas of both concepts. But visually, how do you bring that together when honestly, you have no background in doing that? So, I dropped some little hints in there and we started off with this logo. And that was an interesting choice too, because we knew this was not going to be our forever logo, but we really hadn't yet found the graphic designer that we felt like could realize exactly what we wanted. And I was totally not capable of doing it and never for a moment pretended to be. So we were really lucky because there is a local artist here in DC, Freeman, who is, I think, pretty well known. We all love him. We all love his wife, Tracy, very much. They're both phenomenal people. And I just, on a whim, reached out to Freeman and I said, hey, we have this project. This is the deal. I need a logo, but pause. We're doing an event in 7 days and I want to get t-shirts printed. So I need it in 48 hours. And I didn't see Freeman's face, but I don't think he batted an eyelash. I think he was like, maybe at this point, when people hear from me, they think I'm going to be like, I have an idea, but it has to happen tomorrow. And AJ is probably over those phone calls from me too, but I'm still going to call you. So I was able to work with Freeman, Rose, and Chef Paula to create the center logo, which is now the official La Bodega Bakery logo, which also you can see in the lower right has some representation of Compass Rose, right? So this is where it gets interesting too, because we're trying to loop in something about the physical space that this idea exists in, but we don't want it to be completely enveloped by that, right? Like this is a separate concept. It is a bakery. It is not a bar. It's a completely daytime thing, and it's something that has legs that's going to grow on its own. So it was a really unique challenge to design, and I think it was amazing to see, honestly, how quickly and how tight Freeman was able to develop this logo. And of course, just a few days later, or maybe even at the same time, I was thinking about this kind of block party we were developing as a release for the brand and who I would want to collaborate with. AJ and I had Maidan hosting Back to Black next week already on the books. And I'm kind of always looking for excuses to collaborate with her. So I called AJ on a whim and was like, how about if you did a cocktail for La Bodega's opening party? Whisper, whisper, it's in 5 days. And Chef Paula also grew up in New York, as did AJ, has some roots in New York too. And Chef Paula had the idea to have this cocktail called the Nutcracker based in this menu and kind of as one of our giveaways for this event and a core part of our programming. Now, I went to high school in New York, but it was 2 hours outside of the city, and it definitely didn't feel like the Bronx. And I did know the word Nutcracker, but it definitely wasn't referring to a cocktail. So this was a really important moment where I said, hey, I want you to have your dreams, and I want to give you what you see fit for this program. And it would not be genuine for me to produce that for you because I just learned what it is 35 seconds ago. So it became this really cool thing where everything aligned, and AJ was able to work really, really quickly with her team to produce a cocktail for the event. And we're hoping to actually grow that programming as something that, we can continue to do and continue to actually use, proceeds from that cocktail to benefit organizations that we all agree we should be, backing up every day in any way that we can. So we were able to kind of coordinate this cocktail. And then the next question was like, okay, well, where's the imagery? Where are we going to put our brands together? Of course, working in this insane timeline of this whole thing is happening in just a few days. I put together another graphic, which is the one that you see on the right, that has the Back to Black branding, the La Bodega branding, and then the rose in the background, just kind of referencing Compass Rose again. I know these are small, so sorry about that. Just to get to see them kind of next to each other, that's what had to happen. But this was really, really interesting because it was I think it was a really natural thing that happened, but it was also really challenging. And I think it's important to point out examples like this that are a little bit more in progress, because not every version of the world is timed properly. We don't always have the cash to pay an artist. Sometimes we have to do things on our own, and sometimes we have to reach out to collaborate with people, in not ideal timing circumstances, and just say the thing like, hey, I know this is really crazy, but here I am saying this is an opportunity to amplify Back to Black as a platform in our spaces to our audience for, the first of many, many times that we plan moving forward. And AJ was able to pull it off, and we were able to use internal, resources to make this happen, knowing that it's okay if we have to change something about the branding later. That's sometimes the organic truth of a project. So that's kind of, what I wanted to reference and speak to with La Bodega Bakery, Compass Rose, and Back to Black, which is just a mouthful. That's a lot. So I thought that was a really cool thing. And I think even this conversation in this class and how naturally this happened, when Portland Cocktail Week approached, me and said, would you want to teach a class with AJ? And we had kind of had this conversation already of, when we were talking about the creative constraints class, of the natural progression of that is to actually bring in a designer who understands these concepts. And then all these three things happened together, but simultaneously, AJ and I were working on this other stuff, right? This class, this conversation wasn't developed because of that. It was all happening alongside of it. So I think it's actually really cool, and I feel really grateful that we've had this opportunity to develop this collateral together and these projects together. I know it's going to be many more things after this, but then to even be able to talk about it and see it, from a short view of what we've done is really cool too.
Absolutely. And I feel like the foundation that you've laid with Back to Black, and the foundation you've laid with this collaboration, and even that process of coming up with the La Bodega branding and the collaboration branding is very true, on point to a lot of folks' experiences. A lot of us are working on tight time frames, right? I get a lot of requests from people in our industry that are like, I've got this idea, it's hustle time, can you make it happen in a short amount of time because we want to amplify this, or we're working with this sponsor, or we're looking to launch by a date that fits kind of our understanding of what the revenue might look like or what the ideal time to launch this might look like for us. And that's usually how it goes. You know what I mean? A lot of what I'm doing is, when I'm auditing folks in the beginning, folks that reach out to me about this kind of branding, right? Meeting the person that comes in when someone doesn't have enough time to develop it on their own, or someone that is just like, I don't have the capacity to understand or go into that learning curve of how, when, where, why, and what. Can you do it for me on X, Y, and Z? And again, I feel like that's something that has aided me as I step into this formal graphic designer position, this branding position that I'm occupying as a new business, because I'm still on that hospitality hustle. You know what I mean? I'm still on that, you asked for it, heard, and I'm flipping around, and the turn time is fast, right? So I think that's something that when it comes to communicating what you might need for your branding moving forward, whether or not you know all the assets that you might need, if you know you need a logo or you know you need a cocktail label, really think about what timeline you need that on, and your ask for someone, right? If you've got a creative friend in your life, might be me, might be the next person, might be a homie that just makes the menus for your cocktail joint down the street. But if you've got a creative person in your life that you're going to reach out to as well, be clear about your asks and know what your timeline is and what best suits it. Because if you're working on something that needs to be launched before Thanksgiving because you see ROI or return on investment, blah, 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 about launching before then be clear about what kind of things you definitely need before that happens. So as we go forward, kind of building on what Jess and AJ have talked about, I want to use that as examples and use that as a foundation of where we start talking about brand identity. And that's our next slide. Amazing. These images on the right-hand side are two brands that don't exist. These are examples that I've included from my own kind of work, starting to develop branding for certain folks. So these are the preliminary, this is the preliminary work that I do for brand audits. But specifically with brand identity, I always encourage that we start with intention, right? Who is our audience and what impact do you want your branding to communicate? And AJ touched on this specifically with her branding in Back to Black and kind of the community and the specific Black POC moment that we're trying to communicate there, the redacted history that we're trying to communicate there. If that's a moment, right, for you, and that's something that you want to communicate in your branding, think and be thoughtful with that and be intentional with that. How do you imagine that coming forward? And even if you're not that creative person that's able to kind of imagine what that looks like visually, right? Come up with a mission statement or a goal or a vision for your business and come up with some intention, right? Think about your niche. Think about the folks that you specifically want to market to. It can be as broad as Chicago cocktail drinkers to a neighborhood in Chicago, for example, Logan Square, craft cocktail drinking, whiskey lover, mutual aid supporters, right? So then we get even more specific about the kind of audience that we want our branding to kind of resonate with or reach out to or be relevant for. And this is all a part of the brand identity audit, right? These are things that I think about critically or ask businesses or folks looking to start up what they're doing with their branding. Next, right? Building this foundation is going to inform your branding. Building the foundation of your intention for your branding, for your business, for your audience is going to inform your branding, your outreach, the partnerships that you make, and the kind of promotions that you do. Down the line, the better you know your target audience, right? The better you know the folks that you want to kind of engage with your materials, whether it be something as specific as, POC folks that love this kind of spirit in DC, or something as broad as, 25 to 40-year-olds that drink craft cocktails that might, be able to get delivery or what have you. So think about that target audience, and the better that you know them, the better that you can visually make your brand relatable and attractive to folks. This can be right both visually, but it can also be through communicating a value system or value communication, right? Does this mean that when you launch your brand or when you showcase your brand in physical spaces, what does that look like for partnerships that you're looking for? What does that look like for brick and mortars that you're working with or individuals that you're highlighting? And you know what I mean? If they've got a special cocktail with you and you're doing a to-go cocktail program, what does your value system look like when it comes to partnerships or fundraising for community organizations in your neighborhood or in your community? What does that look like, and how can that tie into your business strategy? Because again, we want to make sure that we're pivoting and we're shifting, but we're being intentional about how that branding communicates that. Lastly, on this point about brand identity audit, real quick. Don't think of your brand as something that is standalone. Again, this folds into that kind of value communication. Consider other brands, other organizations, other products that might be good pairings for your launch or for your target audience, right? When you do that kind of audit inside and you think about your audience, you think about the intention behind your branding, what naturally comes from that in terms of partnerships? Does that look like your launch being in line with a mutual aid program or a non-for-profit or an organization that's looking to raise funds, right? Does that mean that you're able to kind of leverage that connection and that intention with your branding about being like, I understand that my brand needs to be, and I'm aiming for my brand to be community involved. So for my brand to be community involved and for that to communicate visually, but also on a value level, how can I make these partnerships in a launch, in a, a special collaboration and a special promotion? What can I do to further amplify those values? So that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of where we all need to be with our branding audit, first and foremost, right? These are the preliminary stages before you might reach out to a creative person, before you might, hop on Canva and browse some fonts or some color palettes. Think about the audience that you want to reach and what that might mean for partnerships down the line, right? Because that's what's going to really carry stuff forward. When we act in a vacuum or we act out of scarcity, that can often limit where we might see this branding reaching. But when we open our views and see, where are my values, who are my target audience, who can I partner with that I'm in community with, or folks that I've appreciated their work in the past, whether it be in the hospitality industry, beverage industry specifically, but like where can I leverage these connections, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think that the leveraging the connections and the collaboration right now is probably the most important thing, just in terms of like literally getting the brand out there to as many people as possible. That it's literally the most important part, no matter how small, or if this is a secondary concept or it's your initial concept. All of those things you have to walk through each step of what that looks like, because we are literally in a time right now where nothing can be one-dimensional. It has to serve a second purpose.
Yes.
It has to serve other people. It's got to serve yourself. It's got to be sustainable for your staff. Like everything has to then come full circle. And the more people, again, it's still our basic capitalistic economics, right? The more people that see it, the more chances that there are people that are going to buy it, which then gives the brand a little bit more of a chance to keep going. If not, then maybe think about, okay, well, maybe it is a one-off situation. Maybe it is something special that we do like once a month, and it doesn't need, so much backing behind it. But if you wanted to take off and start running, definitely look at collaborative partners.
Absolutely. And I want to move forward into the launching of the brand slide, where we're going to talk a little bit about what you need to keep in mind. It might seem a little too soon, right? Because after this, we're going to be going through a graphic checklist, right? All the things that me as a graphic designer, as a brand designer, as a logo designer, etc., are going to be creating for you, or things that you should be keeping in mind for creating. But ahead of that, I want to talk about launching your brand, how, where, and when, and kind of all the things that I'm thinking about as a graphic designer for a hospitality brand, for a beverage industry brand, the things that I'm considering before I start creating these graphic elements, branding, et cetera, et cetera. So first and foremost, create all the promotional materials you can. Think about all the different assets for promotion you can possibly think of. So we've already kind of looked at being intentional about your audience and being intentional about the values that you want to communicate. And I'll talk in a little bit about what that means for, figuring out, you want to make sure you have your color palettes, your fonts, your et cetera, et cetera. We will touch on all of that kind of nitty and gritty, but along with being intentional about your audience and being intentional about the kind of branding that you want to communicate, I encourage you to think about all the hows, wheres, whens, whats, and et cetera before you might make that ask to a graphic designer, or before you might even do this work yourself, right, on Canva. I love Canva. I love things that you can do on your own. And I know that the Adobe suite, Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, et cetera, can be a little daunting. So I bring that up as a resource that might be a little bit easier to navigate than some of those more difficult or more involved programs for your computer. But these are all the things that I'm thinking about as I'm creating some branding, or even when someone reaches out to me about branding. I'm thinking about the most amount of promotional material that I can create, right? I want quotes. I want typeface. I want colors. I want, pictures of the bottle in a plain background. I want pictures of the bottle being held by folks that I know. I want other brands to be excited about my content going forward and blah, blah, blah. And that's why I've attached Ketel One's Instagram here specifically, just the more recent content on their profile, because I want to show you it's really, really, really all about content. And also touching on leveraging connections and stuff that we've been talking about previous. But you'll see on this image from Ketel One's Instagram that they've got graphics about their bottle. They've got some information, some imagery that's attached to their branding. But then they've also got real kind of juicy photos of their bottle and cocktails and different cocktail kind of content on their platform. So you'll see graphics, you'll see photos, you'll see a mix of the two, a hodgepodge. And this might seem daunting, but it's really not if you just think about it as a, how can I see my brand? How can I see my product in all different spheres, whether it be, digital, in someone's hand, being drank. Think in a marketing standpoint, right? What's cute about my little to-go cocktail? If I've got my little to-go cocktail bottle, right, and it's got my little lovely label on it, what are all the ways that I want to see this very transparent piece of glass, marketed, and what's cute? So think about content, creating as much promotional assets as you can. Leverage those connections as we talked about in the previous slide. You know what I mean? Think about all the different intentions and the values that you have for your business and leveraging that forward. Give products to people that you're close with, right? A lot of us in the beverage industry are close with other people in the beverage industry. Like, hand a to-go cocktail to a friend, hand your product to a friend, whether it be a business card or a little flyer or what have you. Have people engage and use your friends, your homies, your connections to further amplify what you're trying to do, right? We, and myself included, right, wouldn't be a lot of places if I hadn't had made amazing lit connections with other people doing work in hospitality, Jess, AJ, et cetera, right? So think about those connections and how you can kind of even utilize those friends and those homies to help you amplify your launch or your product or what have you, and your branding. Again, right? Content. It's very cute. Build some hype. I'm thinking as a graphic designer, how much can I create to make it hype, right? Is it quotes? Is it testimonials? Is it a cute little, drawn graphic of a cocktail? You know what I mean? Is it the logo or the label for the cocktail, right? We can utilize the labels that we're creating for our little cocktail label, to-go cocktail, And we can make that into a graphic and share that on social media, right? We can have a whole spread that gives us all the ingredients, the mood, the everything, the aesthetic that we're putting on our label, and we can reuse that all over the place, right?
Yep.
Think about all the different forms of hype that you can make around it. Is it a hashtag? Is it a this? Is it a that, right? Think about creating all of that and building from there. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. And then next, we will talk about the kind of graphic design checklist. I really want to have everyone viewing this be able to really take away some moments, some really good how-tos that other graphic designers, other creators, other hospitality folks are thinking about, so that you can be like, yes, I have the checklist and I know all the things that I need to make, whether it be myself or hitting up a couple of friends and budgeting for a creative person to do some of this management like AJ has, you know what I mean, and creating these assets. But first and foremost, when I look at a checklist, and again, this image on the right-hand side is an idea of kind of the loose things that you might need. Fake brand moment example for me. We have a skincare brand. We've got their typeface. We've got the kind of loose imagery that we like behind it. It's kind of loose. It's watery. It's harmonizing. It's relaxing. It's blah, blah, blah. We've got our color palette underneath it. And again, here comes this intuitive logo where we've got the full logo. We've got a reduced logo on a variety of different reduced logos here on the left-hand side and the right-hand side of that image, along with the color palette, right? So think about how this logo can show up in different ways. But as for the checklist, right, think about, what are you working with? If you're a brick and mortar or a bar, a business, etc., what do you already have established? If you're working with a brick and mortar, what is your branding already in that brick and mortar? And how do you look to change that, pivot that, etc., and move forward with this new pop-up branding, or this to-go cocktail branding, or this new label for a cocktail that you want to kind of give it a little room to groove and be special, aside from your brick and mortar branding? Or are you starting from the ground up, right? Are you one of our amazing hospitality folks that are like bartenders and looking for their own hustle, right? So are you building this brand from the bottom up? Think about what you have in front of you. Think about what you're working with. Similar to La Bodega, right? Already working with a bar, but wanting to create a unique kind of representation for something separate, but aligned, right? So think about what you're working with. Create your business and your branding audit around what you are working with. Think about those things. Next, what do you want it to be like? Very simple question, right? Like, what do you want the logo to look like? What do you want the branding to look like? What do you want the target audience to be? And what do you want the language to sound like? You know, are you someone that's leaning further into community work and you want to be intentional about being like, here's my branding, right? This is our business. We're selling to-go cocktails. It's very cute, but monthly or weekly or whatever, we are partnering with these folks, and how do we make that kind of well communicated on our brand? Or even more so, with the logo creation, are there any colors or imagery that you're drawn to that you want to start from the ground up? You know, with that intentional moment, when you're looking at the intention of your branding, what kind of images come up and what kind of colors are you inspired by? Doesn't have to be super like strict and stringent, but think about those things. Next, what do you want people to see, right? Create the content, make the information readily available. We all love a good link tree or whatever, a link in our social media. We want to know, we want to see all the things available, where to buy, how to find more information, pricing, folks that we're collaborating with, all of that. We want to find it nice and easy. So think about how to make that information streamlined, how to keep your shop up, and how to keep promotions cute, available, and ever going, right? When I come to social media management, a lot of my branding will be informed by how I see a business managing their social media. So I want to make sure they have all the content that they need for their social media. It means graphics with quotes. It means graphics with logos. It means blah, blah, blah. I'm going to take a pause here in case anyone has any moments to contribute before we move forward with the rest of the checklist, just because I feel like Honey, I've been talking for like 15 minutes.
Please don't stop. This is great.
Every single day right now.
Taking the most notes I've ever taken ever. So, and I have it all in our outline, but this is fantastic. Please keep going.
Amazing.
With this day and age with social media going on, and social media is another platform for people to like advertise, you know, and so it's important to like show that kind of lifestyle that your brand wants to promote too, because everybody's like trying to like escape from their four walls that they're living in. They're like, oh, I want to drink more Ketel One because this makes somebody feel this way, and why not, you know? So yeah, I agree.
Exactly. My intention here is like, every time that I think about logo design, every time I think about if someone just hits me up to create a cocktail label, right, for their little transparent glass jar, I think about who I'm reaching, right? I think about how this label can be adapted and used differently in the future. And it doesn't have to be as daunting as being like, wow, okay, now I have to like literally become a logo designer. I have to literally make a label. I have to do all of this. If all of that is too much and you don't have a creative friend that you can outsource some of this stuff to, literally just take a little Pinterest browse. Take a little Pinterest browse and get inspired by other brands that are doing things that you gravitate towards, right? Because more likely than not, the things that you enjoy to look at might be the demographic that you're aiming for other folks that might enjoy to look at, right?
Absolutely.
The last few points that I have for the graphic design checklist, beyond what you want your people to see, right? This is a moment of content creation, right? When I was talking about information, how accessible that information is, how people can shop for these products. Are people buying stuff on Instagram? This is a little bit of a moment of also social media marketing, right? How easy or how accessible do you want folks to be able to purchase your products or learn more about what's going on with your pop-up or what have you? Next is keep it cute. Keep it cute. And it's as simple as maintaining interest in your product. And that again circles back to content. If you come up with a logo that you like, right? Don't make it a whole daunting process. Come up with something simple that you've seen, replicate it, make it your own, tweak it as you need to. If you don't have that creative person in your life that you can outlet some of this work to, make that simple and streamlined. Now, how do you keep that content cute? How do you keep on sharing and engaging with your audience consistently? And if it looks like launching an Instagram page where you have friends tagging your to-go cocktails, or you have friends tagging your content that you're making or what have you and sharing, then let it be that and lean into it, right? Lean into keeping it cute.
Totally.
Just keep it cute inspiration.
Yeah.
I wrote down keep it cute.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes. So I want to end this graphic checklist on the few steps that you can take as someone that may or may not have a creative outlet to create some of these graphic elements from you. Might not have someone that's a logo designer, might just have a basic login for something like Canva or another digital kind of creator online, or Adobe Illustrator, or whatever you're working with, sis. We got you. First, create that logo. Before you create the logo, look at the colors that you like. Look at the branding. Do that audit. Be intentional. Think about the art style, right? If we go back to the slide where, I think it was maybe the third slide, where we talk about brand identity and intention, I offered a couple of examples, right? We've got a couple different, on the right-hand side, we've got a couple different fonts, right? This is me hypothetically pitching some fonts to folks. What do you feel with that? Look at some fun stuff. Look at your color palette. Do you want it to be dual tone, meaning 2 colors? Or do you want it to be more than that? Do you want to have, and I would go for, if you want the nitty gritty as a branding person, don't go for more than 6 brand colors in your business, right? Go for something cool, something warm, something light, something dark, and some complementary colors, right? Keep it tight, keep it right. You also want to look at the kind of art style that you want. Keep it cute, like we were talking about, that art style. How do you want your logo to look, etc., etc. The next step to this, after you lock these moments down that I've kind of shown on the right-hand side, that font, that color palette, that imagery, you want to move into utilizing that logo. How can you best utilize that logo? That promotional material that we talked about. Build it out. Make that content. Print out the label, stick it on a wall, take a picture of it. You know what I mean? That's content. And then lastly, making that content around the label and making that available for folks to see. Print out the label, test it out if you like it, hand it to a friend, put it in someone's hand and take a photo of it. Do they love it? Can you leverage that connection? And how do you move forward with that?
Heard.
You just crushed it. This was so awesome.
Yeah.
I could live in this conversation, I think, for a really, really long time. I really think there's some amazing stuff, both AJ and Kasira, that you just dropped here. But Kasira, hearing these ideas so, I think, clearly, and not in this way, like, you know, when you talk about science with someone and they use like the most challenging words ever, you were like, here's normal words to talk about normal things that you have to normally engage with. And I really appreciate that. And I just think this was so awesome to have your perspective. But everyone, I'm super grateful that we had this conversation today. This is way cool.
Absolutely. And we've got a couple of questions that came in as well. So these are going to be for Kasira specifically. So one, we've got like a question about, I understand Canva and I understand Pinterest. Are there any other practical tools for myself to download? And then the other question is, if we want to find someone like you, how do we look for a graphic artist? What are we looking for in terms of like their resume or a book that we can look through some of their designs? What are your feelings on that?
Absolutely. So to answer that first question, I love Canva for folks that are beginning. Mm-hmm. I love it for folks that maybe even need some inspiration about how to format a social media post and build off of a template, because they have so many different types of templates, both Facebook, social, Instagram, Twitter, all formatted correctly, so that you can utilize that. But it can also be really great for just searching a template like, a proposal deck or what have you. And that can inspire your branding moving forward, right? You don't have to have all of it to put together. Not all of us have the creative eye to know where to put, icons and pieces and text and whatever. So Canva is a really great place to find templates that you can build off of, both at the kind of beginner level and intermediate, which is needing some influences to kind of build from there. I think Pinterest is a really great cache of images and other graphic design folks that might be sharing their stuff on there. Love a good poster search on Pinterest. For folks that want to lean a little bit farther into the graphic design sphere, Behance is a platform that a lot of graphic designers share their work on. And so you can kind of scroll through Behance, Behanc. You can scroll through Behance as almost like the Pinterest board for graphic designers, folks that are sharing more kind of in-depth and technical stuff that they've created. Of course, this isn't a template kind of platform. This isn't a creative platform. This is a place to see what professional graphic designers are doing so that you may be influenced by some of their work or kind of see how folks put things together, right? Or even more so might curate a brand, right? There's a lot of mock-up stuff on there as well, where people mock up branding onto cups and blah, blah, blah to see. To answer, to even further, if you're looking to get a little bit of a learning curve going on, I would recommend either doing a trial or subscribing to Adobe Suite. I love Adobe Suite Illustrator. That's where I do a lot of graphic design stuff. It can be as simple as finding some fonts, putting them in a background, and moving some elements around in a more technical sense that sometimes digital platforms like Canva and stuff aren't able to offer. So it depends on your level that you're working at or where you want to learn to. It's great. For me personally, to be transparent, it took me about 6 months to become proficient on Adobe Illustrator with some like gradual time. So if you've got the time and you want to kind of just like chip away at it, I definitely encourage that as well. But it does take a little bit of a learning curve if you're working from the bottom up. And then with the second question, Amy, remind me, we were talking about.
So if someone did want to look for a graphic artist, how would they even go about doing that?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, you're not at it alone. If you're in the industry, more likely than not, you've seen someone launch something. Hit up that person and ask that person who did their stuff. If it isn't that person that owns that brand, like if AJ didn't create her stuff for Back to Black, then more likely than not, AJ has a great recommendation for you. And same deal with folks that end up getting funneled to me is I do stuff with Lush Life or I do stuff with X, Y, and Z, and it happens word of mouth. So if you see someone that you appreciate, even if you don't know them personally, right, just shoot a quick DM and be clear about your ask, right? I love your branding. I would love to, learn about who is available for that or who did that for you. And when you reach out to that person, if they're able to connect you with that person, then also, again, be clear about your ask. Do you have the capacity to do some onboarding work for a new logo? Or this is what I'm looking for. Do you function in this capacity, right? I think reaching out from, close connections is a great way. And I think that also underutilized, but hashtag graphic designer, you might stumble upon someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I follow some smaller artists, especially if you're looking at business platforms on Instagram. I do a lot of like business audit stuff on Instagram. If you're on Instagram and someone doesn't have like, hundreds of thousands of followers, more likely than not, you can reach out to them and they will be able to respond with it. Yes, I have a capacity for this work and this is my budget, this is my charge, or no, I don't have the capacity for this work, but I might have someone to recommend you to.
That's awesome. All very, very great recommendations. Thank you so much. I could listen to you forever.
Yes.
I could listen to all of you forever, but thank you so much, Kasira, Jesse, AJ, for sharing your incredible knowledge today regarding branding, logo design. I know I definitely could have used this conversation about 4 years ago when I was trying to come up with my own logo stuff, and just a lot of things that you don't think about. It's incredible. So thank you all so much for sharing all of your wealth of expertise and knowledge with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for taking the time out to join us for another Monday of Marvelousness. Thank you, AJ, Kasara, and Jess for giving us tips on designing brand labels and keeping it cute. Thank you, Amy, Ketel One, another round, another rally, and Portland Cocktail Week. If you want to see more Marvelous Monday classes like this one, follow Portland Cocktail Week on Facebook. We have new classes on weekdays and an archive of past classes in the video tab here.
Yeah.
We have new classes, and we're also posting these videos on YouTube as well. For folks who aren't on Facebook, we're also on Instagram, so you can find out what's coming up there next. So next Monday, we have two world-renowned bartenders, Charles Jolie and the one and only Giuseppe Gonzalez. Who better than to have these two preach about modern classics? Tell you what, if I were you, I would pencil this in on your calendars, folks, because you do not want to miss these two. So on that note, we will see y'all same time, same marvelous day. You know why? Because this is the way.
This is the way.
Yes. Thank you.
You got y'all.
Thank you.